Welcome, everyone. My name is Ziva Buzeti. I'm a policy research analyst here at Circularise. Today, I'm joined by my colleague Serena Gariboldi, who is our Public Institutions Affairs Officer here at Circularise. We're very thrilled to have you join us today for this exciting session. We will unpack various EU regulations mandating DPPs for all different sectors and their implications for businesses operating within the EU or having partners in the EU. We will dive deeper into the legislative and practical side of things and discuss the adjustments being made to the EU sustainability regulations regarding DPPs. If you have any questions at all during the session, please feel free to submit them through the questions tab. Let us know everything in the chat, any remarks. And we will be conducting a short Q&A at the end of the presentation. So do pop the questions in the chat and hopefully we do get to answer your question. But yeah, without further ado, I will now start the presentation. Now, there's a lot of rich information as we will be covering 7 regulations, and these materials will be distributed to you after. But yeah, just a heads up that we are covering quite a bit of material today. And we will talk about the following regulations that you can now see on your screens. Some are already in actions, while some are still in the negotiation stage or the proposal stage. We'll also show some actual examples of DPPs that were made here by us at Circularise, just to kind of give you an example and showcase how a DPP complying with these regulations should look like. And like I said, because we are covering more regulations, we can't dive as deep as we would like, so we're not gonna be too specific. But at this stage, I would like to give a short poll to kind of see which regulation maybe you would like to know more about. Um, so just feel free to click on whichever regulation you would be interested for us to cover maybe in our next webinars, so we can see everyone's preferences. ESPR, yeah. We have actually done quite a few webinars, and we have a lot of material on the ESPR. So if ESPR is something you are interested in, you can visit our website. We have a guide. We have also an ESPR course that you can sign up for, and you can get, I think it's daily emails on the information on the ESPR. We also have quite a few blogs. I wrote them myself. Um, and we will then make sure to follow up with more webinars on the ESPR if this is what you are interested in. But yeah, I will give quite a good overview today here as well. Okay. Oh, also the CPR, interesting. Okay, I think we have quite a few votes. I see that the majority of the people voted for the ESPR. I'm glad to hear that. I will definitely take this into account for our further webinars. Now, speaking about the ESPR, let's let's start with the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. So the ESPR was adopted in 2024 as a key part of the European Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan. And this regulation is kind of the flagship framework for making products more sustainable and circular from their design through their use to end of life care. The core aim here is to reduce environmental and climate impacts across the product's life cycle, while also helping to create sort of a single unified market for sustainable goods in Europe. This regulation supports goals like doubling material circularity and boosting energy efficiency by 2030. It also strengthens the EU economy by driving innovation across areas, for example, like repair, remanufacturing, and recycling. Now, why is a DPP needed within the ESPR? So a major new aspect of the ESPR is the digital product passport, or a DPP requirement. Why does this matter? So first of all, a DPP promotes circular design and better reuse of materials. Secondly, it brings transparency, so both consumers and regulators know what's in the product and how to deal with it. Thirdly, it enables easier repair, remanufacturing, and recycling. So essentially making sure the product doesn't just end up in landfills. And finally, it supports traceability across the entire supply chain, which is crucial for compliance and sustainability reporting. Now, in April, the European Commission released the ESPR working plan. So the ESPR applies to a wide range of product categories, focusing first on those with the highest environmental impact. So based on the ESPR working plan from April, the following products will be regulated first. So when it comes to the final products, that will be textile and apparel, so targeting longer life cycles and lower water and energy use. Then the second category is furniture, with an emphasis on reducing material impact. Thirdly, mattresses, chosen for circularity potential. And final of the final products is tires, focusing on recyclability and end-of-life waste. When it comes to intermediate products, it will be iron and steel as well as aluminum that are being regulated. Firstly, both are in energy intensive sectors, so the focus here is on reducing emissions and increasing recyclability. There are also horizontal requirements, which were the part of the ESPR working plan, and these apply across product groups, like rules on repairability for energy-related products, as well as minimum levels of recycled content and recyclability for electrical and electronic equipment. Now, what actually needs to be in a DPP for a DPP to be compliant with ESPR? So there are 7 main categories of information that must be included. Every product must have a unique product identifier, like a serial or a batch number that allows it to be tracked throughout its cycles. Secondly, details like repairability, durability, expected lifetime, essentially performance information, and the product's carbon and environmental footprint are needed. Thirdly, substances of concern must be noted. This includes not only the name, but also the concentration of hazardous substances, and safe handling instructions and disassembly guidelines. It is important to include life cycle tracking for these substances. Then instructions for use, maintenance, end of life, sustainability information like the material composition, microplastics, any environmental impact, modularity and repairability, and recyclability and circularity information. This is the ESPR timeline as followed, as introduced by the ESPR working plan. So by 2026, iron and steel passports should already be in action, and then in 2027, that will be followed by aluminum and textile and apparel, as well as tires passports. In 2028, a passport for furniture should already be made, and by 2029, same thing goes for mattresses. These are the actual products of the product categories that I have just talked about that are part of the ESPR working plan. I will not go through all of them, as that would take too much time, but these slides will be distributed to you so you can see whether your products are being regulated by the first working plan and when their passports should be made. Moving on to the next regulation we will cover today, and that is the Construction Products Regulation, or the CPR for short, which is one of the EU's most significant moves towards sustainability in the built environment. This new proposal for the regulation was adopted in December in 2024, and it's an update to an earlier CPR from 2011, and it brings a sharper focus on sustainability, digitalization, and circular construction. One of the key innovations is the introduction of the digital product passport for construction products in this instance. Now, why this is important is because this sector is high impact, which means both in terms of material use, but also its waste generation. And the DPP is designed to kind of tackle these issues directly. What it's aimed to do is to improve life cycle data and traceability of products and materials, enable sustainable design, construction, and even deconstruction, which would allow materials to be reused or recycled more efficiently. Moreover, it's supposed to support compliance with circular economy objectives and green public procurement rules. And finally, it will simplify the market access and circularity marking by creating a standard, transparent digital reference of these materials. So following from this regulation, this is what should be included in a DPP. So first of all, environmental performance and durability. So details on the product's environmental attributes such as carbon footprint, energy use, or recyclability. Moreover, its material content and hazardous substances, instructions for use, reuse, and dismantling, circular economy mark, and declarations of conformity and unique product manufacturer identifiers. If you notice that this is similar to the ESPR, is because in the EU, all DPPs will kind of be made to follow the model of the ESPR. That one is kind of the model passport. But with that said, I will give the floor to my colleague Serena to talk more about the battery regulation.
Yeah, thank you, Ziva. Let's see now together the rest of the legislation that is in force that mandates for the use of a product passport. So the battery regulation entered into force already in August of 2023, and this is, let's say, the EU response to the high demand for batteries. So the aim, of course, ease of making batteries more sustainable throughout the entire life cycle. So for this reason, this regulation applies to all batteries that are placed on the EU market to ensure like material sourcing, recycling, and repurposing after their collection. So all batteries in the EU will require a battery passport. And to do so, the regulation divides batteries into 5 main categories, and these are portable batteries with weight of 5 kilos or less, starting lighting emission, light means of transport, electric vehicles, and industrial batteries. And we will see that this categorization is fundamental as the same regulation entails differences in recycling targets and application deadlines depending on the battery that is at stake. And in general, the recycled content target that this legislation wants to meet by 18 of August 2031 is that industrial batteries with a capacity that is greater to 2 kilowatt per hours, electric vehicle and SLI batteries containing cobalt, lead, lithium, or nickel in active material should have a 16% of cobalt, 85% of lead, 6% of lithium, and 6% of nickel. And all these percentages will be increased actually as of 2036. So, of course, to ensure that these targets are met, and in general, once again, recyclability, digital product passport are necessary. And because of these batteries are kind of different to one another, the same regulation calls for four, let's say, different categories also of DPP, depending on who has access to this information. So firstly, we find publicly accessible information that are related to the battery model. Of course, this is the most expensive one, and it includes the general information of the battery, so the identity of the manufacturer, the battery category, what was the geographical location of the manufacturing plant, the capacity, but of course also the material composition. So what was the chemistry? Are there any hazardous substances or critical raw materials? What was the carbon footprint? The information on responsible sourcing, for example, or battery due diligence, the recycled, of course, and renewable content information, and voltage, power as classic batteries, let's say, and due declaration of conformity. We find then DPP with information that are accessible only to persons with a legitimate interest, and of course the EU Commission. And in this situation, information are related more to the detailed composition, and it includes material that are used in the cathode, anode, and electrolyte of the battery, as well as information on the part numbers of the component, information on the dismantling. So, for example, is there any specific tools that is required to disassemble? And lastly, safety measure. Thirdly, we find the DPP with information that are accessible only to the notified bodies and like Market Surveillance Authority and the Commission. And in this case, it's more the results of the test reports that are in compliance with the regulation or delegated act for batteries. And finally, information and data that are related to an individual battery that are accessible only to person with a legitimate interest. And in this situation, DPP has to include information on the performance and durability parameters, on the state of health, let's say, of the battery, and on its status. So is it an original battery? It is a reused one, and also data that result from the use of the battery itself. So for example, the number of charging and discharging cycles and so on. And as I mentioned already, this regulation is already in force, but the battery passport will need to come by 2027. And of course, as I anticipated already, depending on the different categories, there are different dates of application. For that, I suggested to have a look directly at the regulation. But in general, all of these rules are applicable 100%, replacing the past directive as of the 18th of August 2025. And actually, in 2 days, so on the 24th of July, there are the new rules for calculating and verifying the rates of the recycling efficiency that will enter into force. And for those of you who have followed the whole omnibus packages of the EU Commission, in the so-called Omnibus 4, it was included a stop the clock mechanism on battery due diligence. So the references date that are included in Article 48 and are now being changed. So now battery due diligence is mandatory by 18th of August 2027, and the Commission will provide with further information and guidelines next year. But in general, speaking specifically of DPP, this will be mandatory as of 2027. Now, moving along to, let's say, a parallel and similar sector to the battery, we find the Critical Raw Material Act. This was also already adopted in 2024, and it was in general envisioned by the EU Commission to overall enhance once again the resiliency of the sector within Europe. So to give the wide, of course, and raising use of raw materials and rare earth, the EU has set some clear benchmark for domestic capacity that needs to be applicable across the value chain. And as you can see, by 2030, the EU must be able to cover at least the 10% of its annual consumption for extraction, the 40% at least of the annual consumption for processing, the 25% of the annual consumption for recycling, and finally, the Union shall not be dependent on a single third country for more than 65% of its supply of any strategic raw material. And of course, to do so, but once again, the product passport and digital product passport are necessary. Indeed, from 2 years after the entry into force of the Implementing Act, that means November 2028, any natural or legal person that places on the EU market one of the products that are entailed in scope of the regulation shall ensure that those products bear a clearly legible label. And this product includes, for example, MRI devices, wind energy generators, industrial robots, motor vehicles, and so on. So most products, of course, that use any critical raw materials. And some of these products, if you have a look at the regulation, are the same that you can find in the ESPR, because as Ziva was already anticipated, the DPP is now, let's say, having quite a momentum in the sense that there is a wider range of legislation that mandates for its use. But when speaking about product passport, the battery passport, the digital label, and so on, the reference that is used is the DPP that is starting from the ESPR. So also in the Critical Raw Material Act, the information that needs to be in the passport regards whether the products incorporate one or more permanent magnets specifically, and if so, to which type of all individual permanent magnets that are included in the product, if there should be information, for example, on the weight, the location, and the chemical composition. the access and safe removal of the permanent magnets. So is there any steps, a tool or technology that should be in place, as well as information on the person who is responsible, the manufacturers, and as you can see as the last point, it is required that it is aligned with the ESPR or other delegated or implementing act of the union that mandates for the use of DPP. And as you can see, once again, the timeline of the Critical Raw Material Act is soon going to be in place. The rules are already in force, but as of the 1st of January 2027, the Commission will adopt the Delegated Act, and on that same year, on the 24th of May, it will review, if necessary, the list of what are actually the strategic raw materials, and every 3 years after that, this list will be reviewed. And from the 24th of May 2029, information on recyclability of permanent magnets shall apply to some specific products, in particular the MRI devices, motor vehicle, and light means of transport. And now, before moving, let's say, to what is on the horizon and what are some new proposed legislation that requires a DPP, we would like to ask for another poll, and that is, what do you see with the information you have so far as the biggest challenge in implementing a digital product passport? Is it more the data collection and management, the interoperability aspect of the passport, possible cost and resource allocation, or also given the fact that DPP are still quite a new, let's say, topic, maybe there is a bit of lack of expertise or the general, let's say, regulatory uncertainty. And to move now to something that it's on the horizon, following the Commission working plan of 2025, the toy safety regulation is now finally coming towards the end of its legislative journey, let's say. So this new regulatory framework will substitute the previous directive on the topic with the safety requirements for toys that are placed on the EU market. And this applies, of course, to toys that are manufactured either out or inside the EU. And in general, this new regulation will call for a higher level of protection for children. So it will cover new harmful chemical products, and it will entail a limited ban on the intentional use of PFAS. And at the moment, as you can see from the status timeline, the negotiation of the file is actually being concluded. So the interinstitutional agreement has been found, and the file was voted in the Internal Market Committee during the last month. So we are just waiting for the final vote during the plenary session, and that for now is scheduled for the 12th of November of this year. And after that, of course, what does it mean? That this provision, so there's a new regulation, would likely be published on the official journey and become applicable, be enforced already by the end of this year, with the rules regarding DPP specifically that will be mandatory, at least from the now proposal, in 2028. This, of course, regards new toys that are produced, while there will be likely a transitional period of another 12 months for selling toys that were already produced, for example. So in general, for the moment, the proposed regulation calls for DPP that will be mandatory for every toy that is going to be sold on the EU internal market by 2030. And once again, if we look specifically of the type of information that needs to be in the product passport, we see quite the alignment with the same information of the ESPR. So we will need the unique product identifier that corresponds to a specific toy model with the precise object of the passport, of course, and we need to have information on the manufacturer and the economic operator, references to other union legislation that the toys complies to. For example, we can think of the REACH regulation for the chemicals that are used within the toy. What are the relevant harmonized standards, the marking of the CE, and most importantly, a list of all the allergenic fragrances that are present in the toy and that are subjected to specific labeling requirements and any substance of concern that is present. And with that, I would give the floor back to my colleague, Ziva.
Thanks, Serena. Let's now turn to the detergent sector, actually. A revised regulation is currently under negotiation to modernize how detergents and surfactants are regulated across the EU. The goal here is twofold. So first, to simplify and future-proof the rules to better protect health and the environment. And then second, to support a better functioning single market for these products. The regulation introduces DPPs for detergents and surfactants, like I already said, aligning with broader EU moves towards product transparency and circularity. Now, why does a DPP matter here in this sector? So, first of all, it improves product safety and traceability, especially for more complex formulations. It enables digital labeling, reducing packaging waste while giving consumers and professionals also better access to its essential information. It ensures that refilled products are regulated to the same standard as prepackaged ones, and this protects both users and the environment. And finally, it supports market surveillance and custom screening, which helps to ensure that only compliant products enter the EU market. Now, moving on to what needs to be in this detergents passport. So, the proposal lays out detailed requirements, many of which will be familiar to those already engaging with DPPs in other sectors. First of all, product composition. This includes a full list of substances added to the detergent or a surfactant, categorized by weight percentage. Moreover, it also covers preservatives, fragrance, allergens, and where applicable, also microorganisms listed with full taxonomic classifications. Moreover, labeling information. So a digital label must include the product's trade name, a clear image of the packaging to help users and inspectors identify it. Then we have manufacturer details. So the name and address of the manufacturer and or importer or the authorized representative, if applicable, must be included along with the unique operator ID. Then we have the compliance and identification. So the DPP must clearly state that the passport is issued under the manufacturer's sole responsibility and confirm that the product meets all requirements of regulation. And it must also include a unique product identifier, commodity code, and information for traceability. Finally, a central registry and customs. A reference to the product's passport must be submitted to a central commission registry and declared to the EU customs. Now, I will quickly run through the timeline. So this is still under negotiation, so this is not officially adopted yet. But once it enters into force, industry will have a minimum of 4 years to fully comply with DPP requirements. The regulation, like I said, is still under negotiation with a plenary vote expected in December of 2025. Now to the last regulation we will cover today, and that is the end-of-life vehicle passport, or LVP. Now let's turn to the automotive sector. We're seeing here a major regulatory shift. The current end-of-life vehicle directive is being redone, which is aimed at improving circularity in vehicle design and better managing vehicles at the end of their life cycles. A key feature of this updated framework is the introduction of a DPP, or more specifically, the Environmental Vehicle Passport, or EVP. So this EVP will help ensure vehicles are designed with disassembly, reuse, and recycling in mind, all while improving transparency throughout the vehicle's life. So why do we need DPPs for vehicles in this instance? First of all, it will enable trafficking of materials and components. Second, it will improve vehicle dismantling, reuse, and recycling. It will also enhance producer responsibility and transparency by tying vehicle data directly to the extended producer responsibility, or EPR schemes. And finally, it will support compliance with new rules such as quotas for recycled content. So under this new proposal, what should be expected to be in a DPP is similar to the other digital product passports that we already talked about. So basic information on vehicle type, model, VIN, or a unique identifier, and then materials and chemicals. So there must be a list of materials used, including chemical substances, which is crucial for both recyclers and regulators. Then the recycling and dismantling guidance. So the EVP will contain reuse, dismantling, and recycling instructions to support efficient recovery of parts and materials. Battery and critical raw materials. So this ties back to the previous topic. Information about battery content, especially traction batteries and critical raw materials, must be included. And then compliance declarations, like with the other DPPs, it must confirm that this is compliant with circular design requirements. Moreover, a link to producer responsibility. There will be a connection to the extended producer responsibility scheme for that specific vehicle. And finally, format and accessibility. The passport must be machine readable and easily accessible, and must be kept up to date throughout the life cycle of the vehicle. And this is a quick look at the timeline of the Okay, my internet cut out. Apologies. This is a quick look at where we are in the legislative process. So, the proposal was published in 2023. It's currently under negotiation at the EU level, and the DPP, or should I say EVP in this specific instance, is expected to become mandatory between 2027 and 2029. Now, this is an overall timeline that we made here at Circularise. This timeline includes all of the deadlines of the digital product passports for all of these regulations. I will quickly run through it now to kind of shed some light on the exact deadlines, so it's all in one place. So the proposal, so first of all, in 2024 has been a critical year for laying the foundation for DPPs across multiple sectors. In May, we saw the introduction of the environmental vehicle passport that I just talked about, and new EU7 requirements for electrified vehicle components. Then in July, the ESPR was published, setting the stage for horizontal product sustainability rules across the EU. In 2025, then we shift from kind of publication to implementation. The toys regulation entered into force, and in April, the first ESPR working plan is published, prioritizing products like textiles, furniture, and tires. Then in 2026 is when DPP requirements begin to take effect. So firstly, in January, the first ESPR product-specific regulations will go live, which I spoke previously about when talking about the ESPR. By July, detergents placed on the market will have to include a DPP. And in November, EVPs become mandatory for newly approved M1 and N1 vehicles. So that's most passenger cars and light vans. And we also see EU7 rules apply to newly approved car tires. And in December, the ESPR starts to apply to transaction products, with iron and steel DPPs also expected to begin to roll out. Now let's go to the second part of this timeline. So in 2027, it's all about expansion and formalization. So we expect a legal act on product repairability under ESPR. Several ESPR DPPs are anticipated this year, like I talked about previously. So for example, for textiles, tires, aluminum, and batteries, all major contributors to material impact in the EU economy. And by November, EU7 rules will apply to all approved car tires, not just newly approved ones. Then moving on to 2028, EVP, so the environmental vehicle passport, will become mandatory for newly approved heavy-duty vehicle types. So these are buses and trucks. And ESPR furniture DPPs are also expected by 2028. Crucially, in July of that year, detergents without a DPP will have to be withdrawn from the market, actually. And for ESPR, transaction products must have DPPs by this point, marking a shift from optional to mandatory. So I hope this clears it up regarding the ESPR. By 2029, DPP implementation will reach full force across several remaining product types. We'll see DPPs for mattresses and cement under ESPR. A legal act on recyclability will also be introduced, further strengthening circular design. And as for toys, by 2029, only toys that meet DPP requirements will be allowed on the market. I hope this was a well-made and visually pleasing timeline of all of the events that me and Serena talked about. And I would like to now do a quick poll to kind of see, when do you expect DPP requirements to become mandatory, especially for your industry? This would also kind of help give us an insight into when we should schedule which webinars and kind of where everyone is in the DPP adaptation process. Okay, I see that a lot of it's mostly 1 to 2 years. So yeah, indeed, a lot of these deadlines are approaching very, very fast. And also keep in mind, when making a DPP, this is not a process that can be done overnight. It actually is quite a lengthy process. So if you think that your company will need a DPP within 1 or 2 years, and you do not have one yet, I will seriously suggest to start looking into it, because it does take quite a while to gather all of the important information and to actually adopt a digital product passport that is compliant with these regulations. Okay. Now, I'm going to show some examples of digital product passports that we have made here at Circularise that do comply with the regulations and that are standard. I seriously apologize for the quality. I think this is the live storm's fault. So first of all, I will show the Samsonite DPP, which we have made in collaboration with the company Samsonite for travel accessories. So this is a digital product passport for a suitcase that we have made. So this can be applied from consumer goods to also heavy industry and advanced materials. This is, for example, for, like I said, a travel accessory. And this is what's included in this specific one. There are some of the data that I cannot show because of security reasons, but it does support traceability, sustainability, and regulatory compliance with regulations. You can also search the Samsonite on YouTube, and there is a whole video that was made by us on the process of a digital product passport, specifically when it comes to a suitcase. In regards to circular foam, again, I sincerely apologize for the quality of this image. Here are some examples of the circular foam project developed by Circularise. Each of these DPPs tracks key information like material composition, sourcing, dismantling instructions, and recycling guidelines. These passports were created for products like insulation boards, like we can see, refrigerator doors, and metal panels, all containing PU foam. What's powerful here is that the DPPs balance traceability with data protection. So, like I said before, sensitive information stays secure while recyclers and partners get the information they need. And these DPPs are also public-facing, meaning consumers and end-of-life operators can access sustainability data by scanning a QR code, and only the information that may be public will be shown to them, while certain things still stay secure. This is a great example of how DPPs can drive circularity, compliance, and supply chain collaboration all in one place. And I believe we have one more. And this is an example of a battery passport. The information that is secured is blurred out, unfortunately, but this is how it looks like and what should be included. So this is a great preview kind of what's coming under the EU batteries regulation in 2027. It provides details on critical raw materials, carbon footprint, manufacturing origin, and more. Now, battery DPPs are vital for electric vehicles, ensuring safe second life use, recycling, and compliance with ESG demands. And here you can see how a passport travels with the product from production kind of to end of life, enabling true life cycle accountability. And now for the last poll, I would just kindly ask whether your company is currently using DPPs. So we will quickly just activate the poll, just so again, we can get some insight into where you are in the process, because we are kind of, like I said, during the timeline, right in that transition between adapting regulations to then those regulations being binding. Planning to. Okay. Thank you so much for all of your insight. As we've seen today, digital product passports are not just a regulatory requirement, they're a catalyst for change across industries. At Circularise, we offer more than just digital product passports. As you can see here, with our platform, we can help you with data collection and sharing. We also provide various chain of custody and sustainability solution. For more information about us or about any of these regulations or our services and upcoming webinars, you are also welcome to visit our website and follow our social media, as well as subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you all for your insight and input and cooperation. I will also consider all of your responses in the polls for our upcoming webinars. And at this stage, I can now open the floor to some questions.